I don't know, Philip, why don't you tee us off and just let us know what's going on in the DGrants Workstream?
Sure, and I'm actually really excited and curious to hear more about what's happening on the Moonshot Collective side with grants too, because I haven't heard much about that. That's a cool initiative. And I saw a comment come in about when payouts are going out. The funny thing is that's exactly what I'm doing right now in parallel with hanging out here. So hopefully very, very soon, today or tomorrow, should be the answer to that. We're testing now to make sure that everything goes smoothly, but we're really just heavily focused on 2022 planning and getting the scope right. We've had kind of a wider scope of both, designing the protocol, building the Explorer, running the rounds, taking feedback, and all of those things. We don't have a huge team, and so that's kind of it's a pretty wide scope for the amount of people that we have. And so we're trimming the scope back as much as we can just to focus on, back on the protocol, take the learnings that we've made over the last, 6 or however many months has been, and feed that back into making the protocol solid and being able to release a V1 of the protocol. And so the big focus is having a universal grants registry that not just Gitcoin grants can use, but anybody in the world can use. So that's our #1 primary focus. We are very likely going to be creating a library based on the implementation of the protocol that we did in the DGrants Explorer. So kind of pulling out the components of that others could use in their projects to implement against that grant registry and DGrants, and also probably trying to make the DGrants Explorer more easy to use by anybody. And I guess that I'm really curious to hear from the team here that has pulled the code for DGrants and is trying to use it to run a grant round and all that. Their experiences there, so could definitely use feedback from there, because we want to put some dev time into helper scripts and things like that to set up the grant rounds. We clearly don't have anything in the UI that helps you deploy a grant round. So there may be some work that we could do there. And also, I think one of the last pieces is making it easier to manage the rounds. We would really like to keep focused on protocol. And so the more that we can do around making it easier for another team or other teams or other entities to run their rounds themselves, so deal with the whitelists and update the grants that are in the rounds and do payouts, better. So.
Sweet, thanks, Philip. Yeah, lots of good stuff going on in the DGrants Workstream, and I've actually got this Dune analytics for DGrants, and it looks like there was like thousands of contributions in the last round. So that's the first time one of our decentralized grants has gotten that big. So it's really exciting to see that in grants round 12. The goal, we started talking, I just want to socialize this idea. It's not like canon or anything like that, but the thing that we've talked about is like, how can we do for quadratic funding what WordPress did for blogging? I don't know how many people on this call are old enough to remember WordPress and when that was like an open source phenomenon. It might be like a crypto elder millennial over here, but basically what WordPress did was it allowed everyone to become a blogger. And then there was this really amazing plugin architecture that was generated on top of WordPress that allowed people to extend it to do all sorts of crazy things. And I think that in a lot of ways, what we want to do with quadratic funding at Gitcoin is enable anyone to administer a crowdfund and be successful in building an ecosystem of public goods. So it's kind of like do for public goods funding what WordPress did for blogging is kind of like the North Star that we've started to think about for DGrants. But
I sincerely don't know if I'm old or if you were just kidding about the WordPress joke.
I know, I think there's a bunch of 22-year-olds in here who are like, what's WordPress?
Oh, no, okay.
No, we're old.
Yeah.
Great.
I also feel very old as well.
Yeah, it's like I'm gonna start using GeoCities in my product analogies.
Oh, no.
That was the one that I was going to mention, that if you know about GeoCities.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that it is a good analogy, like for the forkability of WordPress, and also you have like a glide path with WordPress.org where you can just like click a button and you can get it, or you can fork it and do it completely permissionlessly. I just kind of like that as an analog. Anyway, so that's kind of like the vision as it's been coming together. Brent or Philip, anything else to say about that?
I think it's great. I think, really pushing on the plugin architecture and other people building plugins. I think that, within the Gitcoin DAO, we should be building the example plugins and components that people can use to actually run the thing, but to be examples of how they could, build their own plugins, components, and replace ours.
So the way I see this kind of coming together is like Philip is a really amazing architect, an engineer that has built this DGrants. MVP. And the Moonshot Collective is this like hive mind of really amazing builders that can extend and fork things. And the combination of the two work streams together is just so much bigger than the whole of its parts. And can't wait to see what innovation will unleash in 2022. Sorry, Brent, I see you went off.
No, I was just going to say what I'm most excited about right now is like DGrants in its current form, and what I've been talking to about Philip is a very active being built sort of thing. What we're talking about in Moonshot Collective is yeah, the WordPress analogy. It's a great way to look at it. We're not going to be able to build what we have in Moonshot Collective if we're not able to study what's going on in DGrants currently, right? Because what Moonshot Collective is essentially going to be is a much lighter weight, forkable, replicable version of what we're currently building in the model. So I think there's a lot of synchronicity. I don't know, synergy, whatever my like buzzword 90s word is between those two. And like, I'm really excited about getting to dive into both because I don't think we can do one without the other. I think they're very codependent.
Totally.
One thing I wanted to pull at there, it seems like we pulled at sorry, I'm on a tangent here. It seems like we pulled at an interesting thread about forkability there, talking about WordPress. If you were WordPress and you were about to make the decision, do we create a service that lets anybody come in here and just run one, or do we make the code super forkable? You don't usually pick both of those. You would usually pick one route or the other, because if you're making it super forkable, then you're basically like building your own competition to your service. But that's what they did, and it allowed both someone who doesn't want to get into the code the ability to just drop into the site and make something, or someone who does want to get into the code to fork it and make something new. And that provides like an ecosystem to all the folks that were just up on that top layer. So like really want to hammer home like that, the importance of that forkability of both like making it a service and making it like code and available. That just like, that's what we mean when we say really forkable, right? Forkability is like
that's so true.
A lot to it.
That's so true.
And if everybody wants to see like real quick context on all of that, go read about WP and then read about things like WP Engine, WordPress, and then WordPress Engine. WP Engine became like the enterprise thing where people could get involved in WordPress really easily, that they were a company and they capitalized and gained off that. On the other side, it developed into just WordPress, which was open source, right? So you had both sides of it, and it was really cool to see both dynamics in that market.
I think the big thing for me is, like Austin said, that there's both, and that's a little bit weird, but it's like I have this barrier in my mind to going and jumping on a server that's fully closed source and paying for it because I know that I'm stuck. But I will go and pay for a service that I know that I could eventually migrate off of into the open source version. And a lot of times I just stay on it and keep paying the money, but I know that I can move. So.
Yeah, so right now we've got on the order of $6 million per quarter going through Gitcoin centralized grants. And maybe by the end of 2022, we'll start to see this vision coming together of a diaspora of grants that is administering at least hopefully a quarter of that funding. I don't know, we'll see. But that's definitely the trajectory. Really excited to be working with Philip and Brent and the Public Goods Party team on making this come to fruition. If you are interested in contributing to Quadratic Funding, which is Gitcoin's flagship, reach out to Brent, reach out to Philip, and we'll make sure that we'll figure out how you can contribute.